We don't see the video in the boardroom, the cameras. Well, it was on, and then it went off. Yes, it was. I just turned it off. Still a black screen, and then on my computer, I see due to low bandwidth, video is currently not available. So my question was, should I log out because I noticed it has me in as Alhambra versus Crystal Nesbit? Okay.
Comes. Okay,
Why isn't it on this one?
because you got
Oh,
it
we've
set.
got it. Okay.
You got it set.
Okay.
She's saying it's Adobe. Presentation. You won't let her drive. You. Go. Not on it. See a second screen, you won't see any of that. So in the room,
The taskbar is hiding.
She's trying to get the taskbar. That looks good on the inside. Got to move this expand to show panel. Boom. Now, Jamie, do you see the other computer? Never mind, I'll just slide this to the side. The main, you see me moving this expand panel to show video? Oh, it just moves it to the bottom? Okay, there we go. That's good. Okay, then you escape or stop sharing. Yep. Oh, we lost cameras again. Let me disconnect the camera again, Jamie. This is like the third time though. That's crazy. I don't know how to reset. Hold on. Here we are. So what do I say here, grid or? Yeah. I don't know why that camera keeps clunking out. Try it again, Crystal. Share. What are those sidebars? What are we seeing on the side and everything now? There we go. Okay, you shared. Okay, now that, and we see the camera still. Okay, now you're gonna stop sharing, Crystal. Just stop share. Stop share. There we go. Okay, if the cameras don't work, we know just to come up here, unplug and plug back in. You know what we never tested was audio on the outside. See, when you went out, we lost everything. Yes. Can somebody bring us a 6-foot Ethernet cord over here to the boardroom? 10. Okay, thanks. Bye. How do I unlock this, Jamie, so she can come back in?
Testing. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Check. 1, 2. Yeah, we'll have it. Gonna set up her computer. I understand. Yeah, there's typically a 10-second delay. I have like 3. You like some of this for your hands? What? I can make it work. Like the application called. When did you plug that in? Just now?
Just make sure that the mic is here. So if you're looking at the governing board members, just as long as you're talking like this, if you turn your head. So just kind of make sure you're.
Dumb question.
These are better. That could be your password. It could be, if you want it to be a phrase or something.
Effective January. Dr. Myers.
A, meeting opening. A1, call to order. A2, adoption of the agenda. Are there any consent agenda items that a board member would like to have discussed as an action item? Do I have a motion that the governing board adopt the meeting agenda?
I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
Mr. Oropeza, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Conchus. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, move to B, study session. B1, board summit.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself quickly. Pleasure to be back in El Hammer. It's been a little while, so congrats on that. Rob Haas with Gus Rosenfeld to be legal counsel to the school district. Administration and are doing our part behind the scenes to help you succeed. So it's a pleasure. So I was asked to come and provide a little bit of open meeting law training. And I've got a PowerPoint. If there's questions that you have at any point in the presentation, certainly want that is helpful to you. Just so that you're aware, my time and expenses here tonight are being covered by your insurance company. So All right, so some quick basics on the open meeting law. Passed to make sure that government is open, transparent, and that citizens are able to be informed about what its government is doing, so that your conduct takes place in an open and transparent. The open meeting law applies to all public bodies, school boards. Any committee that is appointed by this board would also be subject to the open. And it requires that you as public officers discuss possible legal action only at a constituted meeting. So one potential trouble spot is on committees. I don't know how many board-appointed committees there are, but a lot of times there's a school parent network that is board-appointed. It's specific to a school site. Should be mindful that if there is a board-appointed committee, to comply with all notice agenda. So some important definitions is legal action. Legal action means a collective decision. A meeting means gathering in person or through technological devices of the body, at which you discuss, propose, or take action, including deliberations by a quorum. Not to unpack. Technological devices include text, Instagram, however many options there are. All of that, if it involves a quorum of the members of the public body, that is a meeting by definition. So long as you are discussing, proposing, or deliberating or taking legal action. So if you are all together at the band concert, but you're not, no discussion, no deliberation, no proposing of action, you can be at the band concert and we sort of a thing. Although members of the public question when they see you chatting to the side what you're talking about. Ascribe motives to you when it's happening. So you need to be mindful of that. This can forwarding of emails, forwarding of text messages, even if you start with one, goes to another person, all of a sudden we have a quorum report that because you would be discussing, deliberating to do. So serial discussions are something that you need. That's by phone. Somebody one board member calls you, you call the next person, or the first person calls the next person. All of a sudden, you serial discussion involving a majority. So staff can distribute information to you. Superintendent sends out but you're not then able to discuss it amongst yourselves until this meeting. So if you get information from the patient, you should think about it all you want, but you should be discussing it with other members of the board until that. That's also a way to get unintentionally in so used to forwarding information, sure that people brought into the discussion, to communicate. You always have to remember that we're supposed to discuss, consider, deliver. So that the is informed that, hey, they're going to be talking about this, and I'm going to watch what they talk about, so that if I agree with them, chance to address the board on that. If that doesn't happen at a meeting, there's an agenda and it's to the public, people are shut out of that conversation. Most of the time inadvertently, intentionally, but still, that's the framework that we. And that these communications, these serial communications, it does not matter. It comes through your district's provided email, provided phone, a personal phone. You're acting on behalf of whatever source is used. That is considered subject to the open. So, one thing that I would suggest you consider is trying to keep your communication, district-related matters, coming through your official district email. Not always possible when people buttonhole you at the supermarket or when they outside contact information. But as much as you can, if you use your district-provided email, provided phone, that will be advantageous to you for a couple of reasons. One is not only do we have the open meeting law, we also have the public record statute. All of your communications, almost all of your communications are subject to public requests. And we have to, there are record retention schedules that the state specifies. Different types of records, whether it's an email, text message, whatever. There are public, you retain those records for a certain period. When you use a personal device, you're less likely to have those retention requirements because you be aware of them and control how long something is available to you, as opposed to the district-provided sources of communication. The district is much more ready and to ensure that are met. So again, gatherings are not only in person, but through technological devices. And we want to stress that whenever you're talking about posing legal action, discussing or deliberating that, so subject to the open. So if you get that first bullet point there, by one form of members that propose action at the meeting. What does that look like in your life? You sending an email, hey, I was out and about and I visited school X, and I saw that playground equipment looked we should look at purchasing new playground equipment. CETO. It can be as innocent. It can start as innocent as that. If you say that and peers response back, yes, I agree with you. Talk to one of your members. It can start inadvertently. Just have to be continually vigilant where did this come from? Who am I sharing it with? Group text messages are a fertile ground problems here as well. As you hit reply all of a sudden, something that institute a meeting that should have been submitted to them. Questions about that?
Fair.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or you could send an email to saying, hey, I was out at the school. This is my thought. Can you? Open calls to the public. The open meeting law permits, but does not require you to use an open call to the public. It's commonplace to do it. It's reasons to do it. And it's been a common practice here in LA. The open call is subject to reasonable time, place, and manner, such as 3 minutes per speaker, 30 minutes total for call to the public. When you choose to create a limited public forum, talk, you still don't get to say whatever they want to say, whenever they want to say it, for however long they're talking about it. You are in control by these time, place, and manner restrictions, such as 3 minutes per speaker, per person. Most of the time, problem but a few of us here have been lots of people talk a long period of time, and now when the seas are calm is that you got your protocols in place for time, place, and manner restrictions, publicized and
Nated, well, maybe the whole first 10 people are.
yeah, that's a good question. And you may not always know whether somebody's going to speak pro or con on that. But again, you can impose reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on that. So you wanted to do that, you could. You're not obligated to. A lot of times it's first come, first serve, which is fine because of any. It's first come, first serve. Some people want to think parents go first. Again, reasonable time, place, and manner are appropriate, acceptable, but you have to apply them consistently. What you cannot do is say, we're only going to hear from people that we like. We're going to hear from people that we agree with. We're only going to listen to you if you tell us we're doing a good job. Those viewpoint restrictions are not consistent with place and manner. So that's, those are the kind of the two areas. Is this a viewpoint restriction where we're saying, you don't get to talk about that because we don't want to hear about that? Here pro, we're not here to hear con tonight. Or is this a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction that is across the board? At the conclusion of the call to the public, what can you do? For example, if a parent comes forward and has a relevant request of you, but that item is not on your agenda, you're not able to talk about it. because it's not on your. So what you can do is you can respond to criticism, ask staff to review a matter, or you can ask a matter to be put on a future agenda. Those are your three responses whenever somebody is here at the microphone. And so if they have a viable request, you can say, hey, administration, would you put this on an upcoming agenda so we can discuss that further? If it's a legitimate, question, or they make a legitimate point about, this isn't being done right, or this isn't being done well enough, you can ask staff to review the matter. Come back and report and give the board an update on something. And you can tell people about this, that whether, I don't know if you have kind of a disclaimer that's, some districts have kind of a disclaimer with their agenda where it reminds people that what the board is able to do in response to their comments. So that's a way that you can help to educate those that come before you. But if it's a legitimate point and you want further information on it, you can ask staff to review it meeting. And if it's somebody here just wanting to take a cheap shot at you, criticize you for whatever, then you can respond to criticism. It should be brief. You may not always want to do it. It may not be helpful to do it. Votes in the upcoming election. All of those things are considerations you'll have to think about. But if somebody says you're a dirty, rotten scoundrel, you can respond to that criticism and say, no, I'm not. And here's some information you may not be aware of. So you don't just have to say, thank you, sir, may I have another when they cast away at you. You respond to criticism. It's allowed. Either way, it would probably lose some of its punch if it's after everybody speaks, but it may be better thought out and or even tempered if it's at the end. You kind of, but it could be either one would be fine. All right. So the law also prohibits surreptitious violations. If you can't do it, you can't ask Dr. Mays to ask one of the. So you can't, because you're aware you can't have these serial communications. You also can't go to staff and say, hey, will you check with fellow board members and get their thoughts on whether we should or we should use this contractor. Can't. Asking somebody to do your errand for you, you're still responsible for that. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about executive session. Also, executive session is basically an exception to the standard approach that things are done in public. Legislature has recognized that some topics are appropriate for you to discuss confidential setting, and that's called executive session. So there are some limits on who gets to attend executive session. The board decides guidance whose presence is necessary to accomplish the purpose of the executive session. So nobody is entitled. That is the board's sole decision as to is this person's presence reasonably necessary for us to carry out our executive session responsibilities. The open meeting law lists the reasons that you can have executive session. Most common one, discuss personnel and to get legal advice. Those are the two most common. So here's the list. If topic is not on the list, you can't have a session to talk about it. This list has to be discussed out in public. And most boards are fine with that, very comfortable with that. List allows you to discuss sensitive matters like going to settle this lawsuit, to authorize settlement up to X amount. But you don't want to do that out here. That's then doing. So that's an example of one session. Or, hey, we're interested in buying this piece of property there. What do you think? Pay for it, or some reasons why we want to strategies to ourselves, and that's recognized as permissible topics for executive session. A risk is if you're in there for a legitimate reason, get talking about it. Let's say we're talking about who are we gonna hire as principal next school, and you talk about some of the personnel item. But then if you veer off into, well, you know, Jim Rice School is not doing well in math or the involvement. So how are we going to increase those scores, or how are we going to increase that parental involvement? All of a sudden, we're not talking about personnel anymore. We're talking about an item that should be discussed in open session. So when you're in executive session, not only do you need to make sure that the reason you're going in is legit, but that you stay on topic. Somebody, you know, it's me, or say, hey, we're maybe getting off topic. Let's come back to the. But that's something to be concerned about, mindful of, aware of, is that you have to stay on topic when you executive session, because, like I say, you're talking about something, let's say you're talking about, do we settle a lawsuit? Let's take hypothetical situation. So hypothetical about bathroom access. Want to get advice from your lawyer. Then if you start talking about other topics that get outside of the question you want a lawyer, then it's potential troubles. All right. You should, all of your discussions in executive ought to be disclosed. All of you are bound to observe that confidentiality. You should be reminded of that in each session. By done serving on the board, sick of that mission. Good. But it's there for your benefit, there for your reminder, there for protection. So that admonition should be given when you go to session. The executive session agenda for your meeting will list the reason why you're going. Somebody else is going to prepare. It's really mostly, or whatever, the board president at the point in time. But just so that you know, the agenda needs to specify that reason that you're not. And if you're going to talk about personnel, there's an extra requirement. The person gets 24 hours advance written notice that they will be talked about in session. And administration will carry out those tasks on your behalf. And that person can say, hey, no, I don't want you talking about me. I demand that you talk about me in open session. that's the individual's choice, the individual option there. They decline discuss in session, then session. If the person is, if there's a executive session for personnel, whether that person is in executive session or not, that person can obtain the minutes of the session that pertains to talking about, should we fire talk about that in executive session, that janitor, it's the personnel minutes that pertain. So hopefully, who's ever in there talking about the youth, so that make sure discussion. Just like with your regular meeting, to create minutes, you also have to have minutes of the executive session. That will not be the board member's responsibility, but there may be occasions where it is. And so if whoever usually takes the minutes of executive session is not there, you should make it clear on, okay, who's taking the minutes here. And you cannot vote in executive session. Having this great discussion about the principalship, you cannot vote in session. The vote has to happen out here. Talk about their relative merits and that sort of thing. Compensation you want to session, but the vote on who to appoint has to be done in session. You can give your lawyer direction. Example, it's a lawsuit pending, settling the case. You can instruct your lawyer. You have authority up to X amount to settle this case. Authority. So you would give that direction in session, and then vote would be to direct counsel to proceed as an executive session or something like that. Marching orders, and I go task me to do. All right, so what happens if there's a mistake? If you non-compliant, all legal action transacted by the as if it did. That legal action can be ratified, however. A recent example of this would be, this is all a matter of public record, so it's fine. A couple of years ago, you may have seen Mesa School District, whether their board voted in favor of certain compensation adjustments. And if the board had not approved those raises, void, then the board go back and ratify that, say, well, it's just a technical glitch, meant to do it right, back and, but if it wasn't, in order for it to have effect, you would, so that can have serious implications on things if we don't. It's not conducive to public trust. Back and say, hey, we spill on aisle 6 here. And so that's what we do. So we want to get it right the first time. sure that action taken in violation of also, that's not all downside to not time. There's enforcement provisions included in the open meeting law that support well, let's say anybody who thinks that the followed. Attorney General's office and complaint. His office can file directly with, and the court can impose a penalty, including financial fines, for each violation, as well as assessing costs and attorney's fees against the person to aid another person in violating. So it's per violation, which violations in one. Fines by statute cannot be paid by the school district. It must be paid for the one that didn't do it right. As the penalty assessed against them, checkbook out. It's the check because it prohibits district from something to think about. Rarely happens. Most of the time, I tell you, I've probably handled, I don't know, probably around 100 open meetings that have been filed at the office. Only in the worst of worst situations would against an individual viably consideration, but it can happen. Not going to get 100% support from your community, but didn't vote for you. I think motives are as pure as they are. Question that. So you just have to be careful about that. There is a complaint filed with the Attorney General's office, and they do. The district is not almost always what they require is training, monitoring, things like that. But this is worst case scenario. But people don't call me to say, "Hey, things just the way we wanted them to. It's getting along out here." So I say that let you know what. Okay. Just in closing, any person, you, or entity, that also means you, charged with interpreting the open meeting law shall construe any provision in favor of open. That's the default setting. That's our North Star, if you will, that would guide us through these things. And so we want to open, transparent, invite our community to be part of all of the great things that are, to have voices that are heard and respected and consideration. Can't always do what everybody asks you to do, but as you strew these provisions in favor of open and public meetings, I think you'll respect and the trust of the people. Happy to answer any questions.
What about communication between board members and members of the district, workers and things of that sort? What sort of limitations are there for those?
Okay, that's a very good. From an open meeting law point, you communicating with a staff member is not an open meeting. Concerned about a majority of the board getting together to discuss or the, what you should be mindful of is that's why you have a superintendent. Superintendent is tasked with keeping everybody happy, keeping the trains running on, sort of thing. People will come up to you and say, hey, I've got an issue, can I talk about this or that? And you want to hear their concerns. But I think most of the time, your response in that situation should be, I'm going to talk to the administration about that. I'll ask them to follow up. So you're out of it, and you retain your role as a policy maker, a policy policy board. Administration do, which is of the district.
I have a couple,
Oh,
just
okay.
clarification, actually. Is it a good idea, and we try to do that in this district, but we call them social postings. It's kind of what you touched on at the beginning. You know, if they all end up going to a band concert at one of our schools or something like that. If I know about it, I try to do that. Is that pretty much a good idea to just keep in that practice?
I would say so, yes. It's kind of a belt and suspenders approach, but again, it keeps us aware and alert of what our obligations are.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping that in front of our mind is helpful, I think. You know, you got a lot on your plate, a lot of people tugging at your whatever. So I think that is a good practice. Not required, but a good practice.
Okay, and another thing, what we try to do in this district is when we, the superintendent or myself or another group within the district sends out an email to the governing board members, we try to always remember to send them as a BCC. Stops, people from trying to answer back to them or vice versa. Is that something we should obviously continue to do?
Yeah, also a very good practice. I also see some emails with instructions not to forward this to other board, some kind of disclaimer attached to it.
Oh.
But CCing people to try to limit the, habit that we're in, trying to bring everybody into the conversation, which is laudable in everything except the open meeting.
So if I send an email to them as a group and as a BCC and I ask a question, are you available to meet on a certain day? That's not a violation
Not
of,
a violation.
Okay. Okay.
Because you're not talking about something that is going to come forward for them to deliberate on, discuss, vote on.
Okay.
If it's, can you meet on Wednesday? That's fine. Can you meet on Wednesday? We're going to be talking about which vendor to use. Let me know your thoughts on that.
Oh.
Yeah. Each step down that path.
Okay. Okay. I think those were my questions.
I have one more. As a parent who's also involved in the district on that level, what are some things that I should be aware of, especially for things like PTO meetings or PIN meetings, things like that? What are some trip ups that I would be aware? I found myself in one, and I found myself just being just very quiet because I didn't know what exactly I should be doing. And so, what should I be aware of?
So you as an individual board member don't have any more authority or to do things in this district than another person, unless you're the board. So if you are an individual board member out and about, have not been tasked by the board to comment on something, do something, just a regular old parent. So in that sense, you can comment on, you're welcome to share your views about your school, sort of a thing. But realize that you as an individual board member don't have any more authority than drive your ability to influence the direction of the district by virtue of the office that you hold. So if people are coming up to you and saying, here's my thoughts on X, Y, or Z, that's going to happen to all of you for as long as you're on the board. That's fine. For them out, say, I agree with you on that, or say, I will share your views with the administration. Ask them to follow up with you. That's a get out of jail free card, really, for to use. You know, I will share that information with the administration and ask somebody to follow up. And you're not passing them off because that's really the administration's role. You are a policy-making body. Form your role when you're as a group.
More questions? All right, well, thank you, Rob.
Pleasure. Good luck. Great year. To be about all of our successes. Congratulations.
Yes,
to-
hopefully we don't need you for anything.
Told people being the lawyer for Alhambra, a little bit like being a tag repairman. Want to keep it that way. Evening.
We're going to take a 10-minute recess. C, reconvene. C1, Pledge of Allegiance. D, public comment, and we have no public comment tonight. E, consent agenda. E1, approval of consent agenda items. I call for a motion that the governing board approves consent agenda items E2 through E8.
I move that we approve consent agenda items E1 through E8.
Thank you, Mr. Solorio. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, moving to F, board policies. F1, second reading, policy IJ, instructional resources and materials. Do I have a motion that the governing board approve the second reading of policy IJ?
Second reading.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Oropeza. Any discussion? To IJJ.
IJ, you're right. J is about materials determined to be appropriate for certain, who decides whether they're in a certain age group.
Thank you for your question. Good evening, Madam President, governing board members. Yes. So we go through adoption curriculum procedures when we're adopting curriculum, and through that process, we would identify appropriate levels of the are looking at. We also are very thorough through the Educational Services Department in any new or requested materials that come through to look at appropriate developmental level to ensure that we're providing what's most appropriate for our students.
Policy says that parents can opt out of video, audio, or electronic materials that may be appropriate for the age of the student. So that's left to the purview of the parents.
Parents can have the conversations if they have the concerns with the administrator. We have, through our technology systems, a very high level of security on the resources that we use and that we provide to parents. But if a parent did have a concern about using these devices or this material, they could surely speak to either their site administrator, or they could speak to myself or our leaders in the Educational Services Department about that. We do provide materials, hard copy as well. And then in use of our devices, we have protections and authorization use forms, trying to capture all areas of security.
I understand this is all legislation. I kind of got the paragraph before that talks about instructional material. They are supposed to be written and public instruction that are required by state education. These are the only things we use. So if we want some teacher decides they want to have their students read a book, it's just from publisher. We can't do that. It has to be something that's printed specifically by a company for school instruction. You can't buy a set of books published by Scholastic Books.
So we have a distribution of materials that have been approved that we go through every year that we use. We do offer opportunities for books like Scholastic, but we measure that they are appropriate. The books that we use for instruction, for our lessons, for the development of learning are the books that are aligned to our curriculum. We use McGraw-Hill, we use Foundations, we use Wilson to all support our literacy initiatives. So those are strongly the focus of our literacy.
Arizona Republic. Or the Wall Street Journal, or pick a one. Science Journal.
We would look closely, the site administrator would work with the teachers and with their lesson plans to determine that it was still appropriate. We do have the different laws that have been passed in terms of what's appropriate or not appropriate, new guidelines. So working to try to measure, is an article appropriate for that grade level? Does the content fit within what we would consider allowed, or does it fit outside of the guidelines of laws that have been passed with us? I think for those types of things where they're more a one type of situation versus our district-wide curriculum, it really is the site administrator, the teacher looking through that content together. And we as Ed Services would support that.
So it's very much limited. Thank you.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
F2, second reading policy IJJ, textbook supplementary material selection and adoption. Do I have a motion that the governing board approve the second reading of policy IJJ?
That we adopt the second reading of the policy IJJ.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Oropeza. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
F3, second reading policy JK, student discipline, JKD, student suspension, JKE, expulsion of students. Do I have a motion that the governing board approve the second reading of policies JK, JKD, and JKE?
I move that we, second reading of policies JK, JKD.
Thank you, Mr. Solorio. Do I have a second?
A
I'll
second.
second.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. Any discussion?
Once again, I have I understand starting through fourth grade. Understand that if we are, just want to check that I've read this correctly. If we suspend or expel a pupil, they have to meet all of those things that are and choose. They have all of the things that are understand that there is a limit of 10 days suspension involved in this. The question would be, what is the plan for readmission of these students?
Thank you for your questions. I will ask Alana Ragland to come up to the podium to support in the responses.
Evening, President. Yes, there is a limit of 10 days, and there has to be entry process put into place. So we're creating now so that to understand, and we actually are going to actually looking at interventions. If you look at the policy, it talks about interventions. So we're looking at interventions. We're looking at also mentions a screener to support students prior to suspension. So we're looking at an intervention, and that is reentry.
Just to get a printout. Right points in the agenda. Thank you.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
F4, first reading, policy KB, parental involvement in education. Do I have a motion that the governing board approve the first reading of policy KB?
I move that we read the first policy of KB, parental involvement in education.
Thank you, Mr. Oropeza. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Solorio. Any discussion?
This one had a lot in it. Sex education. Again, I'm assuming this is all because of legislation that has been passed. Do we not provide anything on education until sixth grade?
We do not provide curriculum courses regarding sex education, K-8.
Then there's a piece in here too about we have to explain this clubs and what clubs are. If we are going to have them as extracurricular. So if we had something that was flag club. Understanding. Which I think people should know what we're having.
Yes, and we do offer information to our families in our Alhambra handbook, our student and parent handbook. We offer a lot of information about extracurricular opportunities. But when we do provide extracurricular opportunities, we do send communications home to our families through our students and also through the other forms of communication that we use to reach out to our families, explaining what the clubs are, what they're about, eligibility, all of those types of information.
Just for clarification, law says we cannot do anything about sex education. It's a little bit late.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Move to F5, first readings, policies, BDF, advisory committees, BEDD, rules of order, BEDG, minutes, BEDH, public participation at board meetings, BID, board member development opportunities. Do I have a motion that the governing board approve the first reading of policies BDF, BEDD, BEDJ, BEDH, and BIB? Okay, whoever wants to do all the Bs.
I move that we approve BDF, DD, G, BEDH, D.
B. 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 Oh, is it a D? Oh, it's a B down here. Is it D? It's a D.
Mine it says the D.
Okay. Yeah, okay. It is BID. Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Solorio. Any discussion?
Madam President, there are some very common sense policies in this. For example, BDF advisory committees make sense. BEDD, we have a very good trust in terms of our board and our district, so we usually do not need to use a rule like that to maintain decorum. BEDG is fine, minutes. BEDH, public participation at board meetings is a good one because it prohibits unsolicited commercial messages during the call to public. But then when we get to the BIBs, and that is where I'm going to be voting no on this first reading for policy BIB, and it really, what it says is that school districts may not extend public monies for board members for training, orientation, or therapy that presents any form of blame or judgment on the basis of race, ethnicity, or sex. This does not preclude any trainings on sexual harassment. Blame or judgment on the basis of race, ethnicity, or sex is defined in the statute by the 7 concepts which are listed in the regulation. And reading into depth into the policies, the language that is in these policies is very contrary to some of the resolutions that we have passed in terms of our DEI work that we're working so hard. But I do understand that this is from the state legislature and that we are to be in compliance with these policies. So as a, just as my own personal vote will be no, but I know that these policies will need to be implemented if we are to be in compliance with Arizona revised statute. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No. Thank you.
Motion passes 3-2. G, comments, communication. G1, comments from governing board members.
Say tonight. Extreme pleasure to ride on the bus. Wonderful team of Tom and Dennis. I don't know how they keep their sense of equilibrium going around in circles like this. I said after the third corner, you guys really know where you're going, and yes, they do know where they're going. Drivers are just amazing. Their eyes in front of them. Train was coming, so they turned to different where there was construction, went at safely and that they provided for the students the way they met. Greeted all the parents because these were picked up by parents. It's very impressive to see hard work that's done. And I don't. Buses are very modern. Pull down seats for the young kids. For some of the other special ed kids, is good experience. Ears full. Appreciate her. Ay. Can we make this thing longer? I definitely appreciated her calmness and her openness to listen to what needed to be said and her taking of notes. And I know that she will get back to all the people that had not only compliments, but questions as well. As a district are committed to hearing what people have to say. And it's important that our superintendent set that tone by being the one that went out, listened to what people had to say. She listened to the good, the bad, and the ugly. Same meeting. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for letting me join in.
Madam President, I'd just like to acknowledge Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month and just thank all of the contributions from our staff, our teachers, our administrators, our community members for the contributions that our Latino community has in our district. And we look forward to celebrating other Heritage Months throughout the year. Thank you.
Madam President, I forgot. I went to the ASBA Delegate Assembly. Thank you. I remembered this year. That was an improvement over last year. They were very disorganized. I am tempted to ask why we paid dues to that association. They did not send an agenda. They did not let either Lupe or I know what time we were to be there or what time the meeting was going to be over. When I got there, they didn't have enough packets to pass out, and so there was no hard copies of anything to deal with. I'll say that it was quick, There were a couple of, most of the topics were pretty much the same ones that have been on the agenda for many years. They totally did not discuss anything about COVID. The things that I thought would be maybe interesting to us was an expansion of the, and understand, these are not things that, these are items that as a school board, they're going to work with their other organizations and their lobbyists to try to get legislatures to think about putting into legislation. So the one on social and emotional learning, they expanded that to include wellness, not just programs, and they wanted the programs to be research-based. All of these things passed, and I think that was good to do the wellness piece of it, not just the instructional piece of it. They had a pretty lengthy debate about allowing school districts to provide housing. Originally said teachers, was changed to be that allows school districts to research funding and accessibility for affordable housing for all staff, because we know it's not just teachers that don't get paid salaries. That was a big issue for the rural districts, but the urban districts also got on board with it, because districts like ours, actually it's even worse in some districts like Paradise Valley. You want to go try to find someplace affordable, live out there. Then the third one that caused a great amount of discussion was there was a resolution that we, School Board Association, should lobby against anything that would limit people's rights to vote. A lot of discussion about whether that was really something that was in the purview of school districts to be concerned about. And it did pass because we officials, and we should be concerned about sure that they'll understand their rights to vote. So yes, thank you for letting me go. Hopefully next year they will be better off. Thank you.
All right, moving to G2, governing board direction and/or agenda item request.
I would like to request that maybe once a month, idea of who's been suspended, expelled, some of the disciplinary actions, we have gotten that in the past. Thank you.
I just want to remind all board members to make sure that you respond to all correspondences from the superintendent and/or Dana in a timely manner. G3, comments from the superintendent and executive team.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to share that, like Ms. Del Campo shared, I've been enjoying the listening tours, so I've attended several now, and I'm so appreciative. I know how busy everyone is, and so I'm so grateful for those who've made the time to come and share the things that they're proud of as a district, the things we do well, and also where they'd like to see us as a district in 5 years from now thriving, and what that looks like, feels like, and sounds like as we look forward to achieving that. And then also, again, things that we can grow in, and boy, as Ms. Del Campo shared, they've given us some great insights. And I look forward to continuing to work with our leadership so that we can really continue to work towards making our schools the great places, learning spaces that our kids deserve. So I want to thank everyone for their hard work, and we really appreciate all everyone is doing for our children and community. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to H, meeting closing. H1, next governing board meeting is October 7th, 2021. H2, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Solorio. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Oropeza. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Meeting ended. Thank you, everyone.